Was all the timelines are sandwiched right now together because we're getting ready for something big to happen. So think of Earth, and you have all these different game boards of Earth, and they're all in a sandwich together, and people are experiencing different things. In the timeline that we're probably in, we're going to be seeing the systems fall. People being exposed completely, people being asked to stay home for a few days, and all this disclosure coming out. But really what we're looking at is the military taking over the systems and letting the systems crash. But there's already something in the background. But I feel like it's very soon, because the disclosure about the ETs is coming out like every day. I think that we will probably see the Pleiadians first. We will see more humanoid versions of them first, but the insectoids have been amazingly helpful to us. They're very scientific, so they've really helped with the human body and healing, but I don't think people are ready to see them yet. I don't think politics will really exist in the future in the same way. There is a group that has been working to pull it down for a long time, pull down the curtain. So it's almost like the Wizard of Oz, and we're about to see the wizard.
Our guest today is Honey Golden. Hi, Honey. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so excited that you're here with us because I recently saw a video that you did on your YouTube channel, and I was just like mesmerized. Like, it was so much information. Yeah, it was really great. I'm excited to have you join us.
Well, I've been talking about hidden history for a very long time. But there's so much that's going on right now. Like, we're at the precipice of something really big. The hidden history is going to come out pretty quick.
Okay.
But also remembering who we are as a consciousness and having fun with it versus being freaked out about it.
Now, in regards to hidden history and things coming out, how much of what is playing out in the media these days do you think ties back to all of this in terms of like what's being shown to us?
They're showing a lot. Most of it's in movies. I noticed that Tucker Carlson is kind of funny about it lately. So he's been sharing some things. But movies that I would recommend actually are like the Marvel movies. What else? Moonfall is really good. I believe that we have 2 moons. Which may blow people's mind.
Well, I've also heard we have 2 suns, right? There's like the great sun and then the sun that we have. So now I didn't realize we had 2 moons as well.
We have 2 local suns, and then we have the great, central sun as well, which we haven't seen for a very long time.
Right.
So we don't actually see it in our sky.
Yeah.
They tell you a lot of truth in movies. So the Truman Show.
Yep.
Wow.
That's a huge one.
Wow. That one blew my mind. My mind.
Yeah. And that's us. So we've been in that kind of like a containment area for a long time. Earth is massive in comparison to what we've known. And I think that the flat Earth thing is actually, that was one of the first psyops about Earth itself. But it woke a lot of people up. So I think that that was actually good, but I didn't see it as flat when I was kind of pulled out of my body to go look at the Earth. There's just so much. Like, you could spend years digging into it. The main thing is to enjoy what's going on now and to have fun with the things that are unfolding instead of being like super attached to like, oh, well, look what they did to us over here and look what they did over here.
Right.
So we're kind of moving out of that.
Yeah, I think some people are still stuck in those ways, especially when it comes to politics. And, we've got the election coming up, and that's really causing a huge divide, right? I think a lot of people are taking sides, and then they're letting themselves get, out of control with their emotions about it. And hopefully we're kind of moving in a direction away from that, because to be honest, I don't think there's much of a difference between the two sides. I think, we really have to get away from this whole way of doing politics at all. It shouldn't be one against the other.
I don't think politics will really exist in the future in the same way. There is a group that has been working to kind of pull it down for a long time, like pull down the curtain. So it's almost like the Wizard of Oz, and we're about to see the wizard.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
We need to see what the wizard looks like and who the wizard is. Although I feel like the wizard is not just one person. I feel like it's a large group of people.
It was a massive group of people, and they weren't all human. So that's another stress point for a lot of people. But that's been pretty much taken care of at this point. So when we see the wizard, it's not going to be anything to be worried about. But still, a lot of people will worry. It just depends on where your emotions are at.
Mm-hmm. And I know you just mentioned the moon. And obviously, for many years, there's been a lot of people coming out saying the moon is not an actual planet. And I don't know if one would call it a satellite, but there's alleged people allegedly inside the moon, in different species working together. What are your thoughts on what the moon is and who is on the moon? Do we have humans there? Do you have any other information on that?
So there's two of them. And if you want to know what the one is that we don't see, they actually kind of merge it in the movie. But the one that we don't see is what I would call the Anunnaki moon. And if you go and you look at Star Wars and you think of the Death Star, that's the Anunnaki moon. So you have this huge planet type spaceship where a lot of things, have happened over the years that have been really nefarious, but now it's been reclaimed by good, entities, and good things are happening there. But the moon that we see, I see it as a luminary. So I see it as a piece of plasma, basically, that has kind of a map of Earth on it. So if you really dig into what's shown, there's a map that was discovered in the UN that matches the moon.
You mean there's a map like showing what the topography is of the moon?
Of Earth.
Like, so it reflects Earth's?
Well, it's like, think of it as a nightlight. So the moon is like a nightlight, the one that we see that shines in the sky.
Yeah.
And it's showing us a map of land here on Earth that is actually larger than what we know of. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah. I know. My brain is like working quick to try to figure that out.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. If I could interject just for a second, the moonfall. So that it's funny how back when I watched it, it was sci-fi. It was science fiction. What a great movie. I love science fiction. Love it. Drawn to it. But now looking back on it, what a different perspective, I mean, so my question to you is how much, you don't have to go completely down the rabbit hole with it, but how much of it would you say was true and how much would you say was a little bit embellished? Like, for instance, the black tornado thing that comes out, that's the nefarious entity, the black hat, if you will. And the other part of it is when it's a sentient like machine that's there to. So how much of that? Give us a little peekaboo on what you're thinking about that.
So the people that have been controlling what we've been doing for a long time, here on Earth and been feeding us false history and creating, all the systems and all that. Universal law is that you have to tell people, you have to get an agreement to be able to participate in a game with them. Okay. So think of Earth as a board game. Think of it as Monopoly. And you have to say, okay, so I'm going to be the train. You're going to be the hat. I'm going to be, whatever, all the little pieces. And do you agree that I can go 10 spaces over here? So universal law is that you have to get an agreement. And the way that they would get an agreement from us is that they would put out a movie. They'd, do things that were nefarious, but they'd say that they weren't real. So a lot of the stuff that's fantasy or fairy tale is actually disclosure. And over the last few years, it's become more and more disclosure because there's a different group that has been fighting for good that has taken over a lot of these systems. So they're in the process of breaking them down. So I do believe that came from The Good Guys, that movie. But the things that they kind of like merged the two moons. So it's not going to fall, for one thing. But the whole idea of it falling, that could be when they actually took it over, that moon. And it's not, they merged the luminary and the planet type spaceship together in one storyline, whereas they're separate. So that's the biggest part that I think is wrong. And then what it was powered by was not right to me. So I always got that it was powered by a crystal, which is also a being, if you get down to it. Like, I think it's been proven by the military, by Tesla, by other people that crystals are beings. So they have consciousness. They just move slower than we do. So just like we have a body that's made of light, which has also been proven, and it seems solid, it's actually not solid. So to me, it's just those two things that are kind of out of whack in the movie. Everything else is real. And there was a lot of tech that was pretty negative that was coming from fourth density that was basically hidden from humanity and doing kind of nefarious things in the background.
Thank you so much for sharing about the universal law. And because a lot of people bring this up in their interviews, but nobody really explains. And I think some people listening are like, what are they talking about when they say they have to show you what they're doing? And the way you just explained that, I think that probably answers a lot of questions for people who maybe didn't know how to ask the question or who to ask, or didn't even realize they didn't know what was being talked about. And when it comes to that, I think that, yes, you're right. There's so much disclosure built into movies, into, just pop culture, music. I mean, there's just it's everywhere. But here's the problem I have with this. If there's information being delivered to let us know something, and we don't know that's the intention, I'm calling BS on that. Sorry. No, that is not a form of you telling me what's coming up, because I'm not playing the same game as you, because I don't know that's what you're doing. So it's not fair. So to me, that is not the right way to do things, because if you're going to do something and you are going to use it for nefarious reasons, then you do need to be forthright and upfront and actually come out and say, here's what I'm going to do. And then we get to decide from there if that's okay for us or not. But if you hide it and cloak it in music and in news reports and in, magazines or movies or what have you, that doesn't count in my book. I'm sorry. That is not fair to do to people. Right. People don't know what they should be listening for, looking for.
It's like lying by omission.
Well, and honestly, that's how so we've been in a polarized universe. So when the universe was created as kind of a learning area. So whether you believe in God or source or oneness, that consciousness wanted to explore and wanted to basically expand. So when that started to happen, the beings that were born to create something, and they were told to create something. That's what they were getting from the consciousness, and they were obviously part of that consciousness, but the way they chose to create was through polarity. So if you think about the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, it was all created that way. Now, Earth went sideways for quite a while because the dark kind of tipped it more in their favor. Now, that's not going on anymore, but it's only been about a year since that's actually been won by the light. And a lot of people, they've said for a long time that the war was won, but it was still playing out in the universe. And you have to remember that we are consciousness in a body. So we're a player in the game of life on Earth. And when we take things really seriously, which we have for a long time, because we've been in a really dense, consciousness. So think of it as the ocean. We've been at the bottom of the ocean for a long time, and it's been very intense, and there's been a lot of pressure on us. And right now we're swimming upward in the ocean. So pretty soon we will surface. And when we surface, we will be in a different density completely. So we're going to see things and know things that we've never seen or known before.
Yeah, that's exciting. It's a little bit scary too, I think, because there's that unknown factor, and we don't exactly know what that looks like. But I do want to go back to what you just mentioned about polarity, which we also may call duality, right? Mm-hmm. So we have the yin and the yang, the opposites. With these higher evolved beings that don't have war, they don't go to the extremes that we go to, right? And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to explain this the way I'm intending, but if they're living in a society that doesn't have the extreme polarities that we have, they have to still have polarity, right? Like duality still has to exist for them, because I don't know what else is there other than duality. And then the next question is, if it does exist, is it just that their extremes are not as wide as ours? So like for them, maybe, I don't know, ignoring somebody would be just as bad as murdering somebody. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the offense is not as great, but it's in their mind, it's as extreme as what we're dealing with on Earth, because they don't have anything beyond that limit. Their limits are just more narrow than ours.
So there's third density, which is where humanity has been. We've now moved to the top of fourth density. Fourth density is where a lot of the beings that had no veil were torturing us from. And then we're moving into fifth density. So fifth density is where things are more serene, but also the entire universe is ascending. It's not just us. We've had a veil. So we haven't been able to see our relatives if they passed away. We haven't been able to see any ETs. We haven't been able to see the fairies. We haven't been able to see anybody. And that's because of the veil. And the veil only exists within the mind at this point. So the human mind is letting go of the veil. And as that happens, we're going to learn in a transparent way, and we're going to learn with more love. That doesn't mean that nothing bad will ever happen. But we'll actually think of it like, oh, so this happened. Like I just dissolved this relationship. So that means something else is coming in. And we won't be so attached to everything because we'll know that we're eternal. We won't think that this is the only lifetime that we're going to be having. And we'll realize that this is a learning experience. So we won't be so attached to every detail that happens. So it's going to be really interesting, but your soul knows all this stuff. It's just that your body and your human consciousness are learning it.
Well, that actually really explains that for me. So I appreciate you sharing that, because what I got from what you just shared is that the degree of wrongness, let's call it injustice, what have you, will not change, but the percentage of how often that happens will. So that those types of things that are nefarious or any types of abuse, those things will reduce in terms of numbers and how often and frequency that they're happening, even though they still could happen.
And you'll also know that it's coming. So if somebody is going to, do something bad to you, say they're going to pinch you, right? Because I don't want to say anything on YouTube.
Right.
But
Yeah.
so they're going to pinch you and it's going to hurt, right? But it's coming. You can hear in your mind that that's coming. So you can step away. So there's no veil. You're going to know the intention of the other person. And if it's not in your highest good, you can say, no, not doing it. So there's going to be a lot of learning that way. And it'll be a long kind of evolving out of the 3D patterns that we've had. But it's going to be amazing. And those wars that were going on, like the Galactic War, that was depicted in Star Wars. That was the war with the Orion Wars. That was the Orion Wars that we were seeing in that movie. So everything has come down and had been channeled into people while they're in that space where they can write, or they're doing something creative. That's when you're connecting to your soul. And also there are beings that are saying, okay, we really need this to be introduced to humanity. Who's going to do it? And your soul will pick it up or not pick it up. And that's what's in the field.
And I understand right now we're going through the Ascension, the Great Awakening. And it's not only us as humans, but it's planet Earth as well that's ascending. And when that's happening, our bodies are actually changing. So we're going from a more carbon form to a crystalline form. And when I hear that, I think, that's a little confusing when people say that. And I'm like, well, does that mean I have crystals in my body? Like, what exactly does that mean? I know it's happening on a molecular, cellular level with our DNA, but what does that really mean, in terms of everyday life for us? How is our body changing? What can we expect to see in the future as we continue to change?
Well, if you think your body's made of light and then you're utilizing elements from, Earth, but actually they're everywhere, these elements. So what happens to carbon when it's under pressure? It turns into a diamond. So basically we'll be made of diamond dust versus carbon dust. And we'll be able to reflect more of the light that's actually within us. And we'll be healthier. So just in general, it's going to be a lot easier for us to deal with our energy just in general and maintain our health. There's just so many things that can be said about it. Like frequency is going to be the new medicine, I believe. So that's light and sound. And it's going to reflect so much better off of your body and be utilized so much better if you do have a shiny surface versus a flat surface.
And I've heard somewhere along the lines years ago that our bodies used to be brighter than they are today. Like our skin was actually brighter, and that we've been dulled down, and we're going back to what our bodies used to be, where we were more luminescent.
Yep. Yeah. And that was changed during the Atlantean times. And that's why Atlantis fell. So Atlantis was getting in trouble by the universe for its behavior with altering DNA. So we had a lot of DNA that got deactivated during that time. And it was to kind of dumb down the human so that they would be satisfied with staying in the 3D and they would have a veil and all that kind of stuff. So we're reversing that now.
So is the 3D completely going away? I mean, are there going to be other planets that are still in the 3D? Because that's part of what this matrix is all about, right? The game that we're in, that we're playing, is because we chose to come to 3D so we could experience what it's like here. We could experience taste, touch, sound, feel, all of that. So is that going away completely, or are there other planets that exist in the 3D?
So most of the planets exist in the 5D. So density wise, that doesn't mean that beings don't have a body, though. So humanity is the last group to ascend, the last soul group to ascend. Everybody else is already in the new universe, and we are too. We just don't know it. So we are in the process of ascending into it, but an ET has a body as well, and they can taste and touch just like we can, but they're doing it in a different way. Like they can see spirits. They know more about how things work in the universe. Like there's no veil for them. So they can travel with portals and, do things that are completely different than what we've done because they know how to manifest it.
Hey there, listeners. If you're enjoying this conversation, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. And let us know what you think and leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you. Your interaction with us really does help us grow our channel and continue to create more content just for you. So thank you so much for all of your support. We really appreciate it. Now back to the show.
I'd love to go back to, if we could, when you were mentioning that we're not able to see the fairies and the ETs and all those extraterrestrial entities. Recently, it's my new obsession. Well, not recently, but last year in January, I think you've heard about what happened at the Florida Mall and how the police presence did not match what they were saying was happening. So it could have been anything, but the overwhelming leaks that came out of that particular situation where there was an ET presence. And recently there was some sort of congressional hearing where somebody came forward and said, yes, we have somebody in custody. They kind of, I don't know if you would they beat around the bush type thing and didn't quite say anything, of substance. And my question to you is, the person that I saw describing it, it was really specific on what he was saying because it was exactly what you're saying. And I'll get to that. When he was seeing what he was thinking he was seeing, it was a 6 foot, if you could say, gray. And it wasn't just the being, it was in waves, almost like it wasn't quite a glitch. It was almost like there was like a cloak of invisibility, but it was kind of going in and out. And that's what he saw. So I would love your thoughts on that because I'm riveted to that whole thing. And again, maybe we'll put like a little clip of it, but the police presence and then what they showed, what was going on, there must have been 300 cop cars and tanks and stuff like that. So I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah. So when that happened, and what I do, my information, most of it comes from my higher self. So I have been cultivating that for a long time, just being able to talk to my soul and figure things out because they have objective perspective. Like they can see it all. But what I got is that it was a group of 4D, so fourth density beings that opened up a portal into the wrong timeline. So they were extremely upset that they had showed up there. And people reacted in such a way that was so extreme. And they were trying to figure out how to get out, basically.
That makes so much sense based on what I'm hearing from that wasn't supposed to be there. And they were kind of walking, almost not knowing what to do. Whereas if they were trying to do something bad, like it was almost, Tara has this joke that the aliens come to Earth as like Disneyland to kind of look at the zoo, where the zoo animals, and that maybe that cloak came off for a second, was like, whoa, or, so I think, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think they came out of the fourth density and intended to go into what I would call a lower timeline where people wouldn't be able to see them. But they ended up in a higher timeline. So they ended up in a place where they could be seen, and they were super freaked out by it.
They were on their way to Disneyland and they
Yeah.
just got lost. No, I actually have heard exactly, honey, the way you just described that. I've heard that from other people who are psychics and channelers who have said the exact same thing. They said that they stepped into the wrong density. They came out, they thought they were in fourth density, if I'm remembering what I heard them say, and that it was a complete mistake. And they were caught off guard just as much as the people who saw them were. And everybody was kind of like, what's happening? Like, who are you? And what do you want? So, but I think that's the kind of thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we can expect to start happening more often, because now that the veil is thinning, there is less transparency, or I should say more transparency, where we can actually see the things that we've never been able to see before. You know, that's spirits, that is ETs, whatever is beyond the veil is now something that is available to us to see it, at least in a slow moving nature right now. I don't think it's fully transparent, of course, but we're getting there, and it's happening. I think maybe happening for people who are a little bit more higher frequency. Although that begs the question, well, then how is it that that happened where so many people saw it, right, during that event?
I think once one person saw, that's all it took. So, you know, once one person recognized it and said, because we see things all the time and we just bypass it.
Is that because of the collective consciousness? So one person sees it, so then everyone is available to see it?
So it brought it into other people's awareness. And it wasn't, they weren't able to just gloss over it.
Because it was so obvious to them.
Yeah, you see ETs out of the corner of your eye. You know, I have anyway. I've heard them walk up behind us. So my husband and I would sit on this bench. We have some trees, and we'd sit on this bench, and you heard footsteps come up behind us. And I said, I think an ET is here. Do you want to see him? And he's like, nope, not ready. So we never turned around, you know. So things like that are happening all the time. And most of the time people aren't acknowledging it. So it's like when the Spanish came to Mexico, I think it was Aztecs or something. And honestly, I don't have this probably correct, but the Spaniards came on a boat, and one of the boats landed, like, you know, the small rowboat landed, and they were talking to the natives, and they were pointing at their big boat, but the natives couldn't see it because they didn't have context in their brain for what it was.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So we've been bypassing things for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then what would you say as far as what percentage of entities on this planet, humans or otherwise, what percentage is actually an ET that we may be encountering these people? And I know there's hybrids, but I'm talking about like maybe ETs that are actually in a different form for the sake of fitting in. How often do you feel like we might be interacting with those entities?
Quite a bit, especially when we're shifting timelines. So when we're in a big shift and you can feel that everything feels just slightly odd, and maybe there's not as many people that you normally would see, like you're used to seeing a lot more traffic or whatever. So that happened once, and then I went into town. And after I went into town, there's like nobody in town. But I went into the grocery store, and it was the weirdest experience that I'd ever had in the grocery store. And I think because I wasn't actually in the grocery store. So the people I was dealing with were the most socially awkward people. And I think that they were ETs.
Wow. Okay. Do you think you could have been on a different timeline where you were not in this time frame? Like, what I mean by that is, like, Dolores Cannon talks about this, and I've heard her speak in her videos and in her books about the fact that there are some people that have just accidentally, for whatever reason, walked out of their front door of their home or their apartment in the morning, and like the old time cars were going by. Like this would have been in like the 2000s, let's say. And it was cars from like the 1920, and people were dressed that way, and they were still in their everyday regular timeline clothes. So people were looking at them thinking they looked very odd, and they were kind of looking around like, what's going on? And then somehow they glitched back into their actual timeline, but they had that experience in that moment of being in a completely different timeline.
I think that was really rare in the past, and it's very common now. And we're not going backwards. It's like we're building new timelines. So think of Ascension and think of it as a spiral staircase. So as you are on a step that nobody's been on yet, you create your own reality. So what have you created yet? So you're there kind of
manifesting, like we're manifesting that, right? We're manifesting our future.
We are. And we're also manifesting crowds. So I talk about this a lot, but my husband and I will drive together. When he drives by himself, there's always a lot of traffic. When I drive by myself, there's hardly any traffic. And when we're in the car together, I have to say things out loud, basically, to get the traffic to clear. So I say, NPCs go home. And I made him say it with me the other day. And all of a sudden the traffic cleared. There was hardly anybody on the road. And he was like, what's an NPC? You know, like, what is this? And I'm like, you're manifesting all this traffic. And he doesn't compute that yet. So I just, said, listen, you have to agree that we're not going to have all this traffic. So I made him say it with me, and it just disappeared.
That's funny. I was going to reference the NPCs. Tracy's probably like, what in the world are you talking about?
No.
It's non-player characters.
Right.
So they're not actually, they don't have souls, correct? They're basically essentially people walking around without a soul.
It just depends. So a lot of times, there's different kinds of NPCs. Some of them are like a human being that just has a human consciousness. And that's somebody that you would see that would be, they would have a really hard time with change. They would basically their life goes in the same loop all the time. So they just do the same things all the time, every day. And they're probably not people that you interact with a lot. But if you have a real NPC, it's somebody that you've created to be in a crowd. So they're not really there. They're a hologram. And if you think about the movie The Matrix and how Neo was with Mr. Smith, and Mr. Smith was duplicating himself so that he could beat Neo. That's an NPC.
Okay. That's
a lot.
A lot. I mean, I'm a huge Matrix fan. Again,
Tracy's like,
yeah, there's a lot of, listen, I'm a huge sci-fi fan. It's always been my go-to to some degree. Still is, but that's a lot to swallow. That's a lot to swallow. My brain's like, Tara always has this thing with time and her brain trying to wrap around the different timelines and how that works and how that affects us. This is mine now. I can't wait to look into this a little bit more. And thank you for clarifying what that is.
Yeah. So there's certain movies that are really helpful. So The Matrix is really good. The first one. What is it? Doctor Strange in the Multiverse is really good.
Saw that one. Yep.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is really good.
I saw that one. Honestly, I was a little confused by it. It didn't make sense to me. There was no okay. I mean, I was only
the one that I haven't seen. You saw. I love it. I've seen everything.
Yeah. So what I used to do is sit down with a notebook. And I knew how a lot of things were happening, but watching the movies would expand the questions that I had to ask my higher self. So I'm like, is that real? Is this real? What is this? and it helped me like compute it in my brain what was actually going on.
I know there's movies that will have disclosure. How should I say this? There's white hat disclosure and black hat disclosure, right?
Mhm.
Built into movies. And the ones you just named, are those on the white hat side?
Yes, I get yes on both of them. Yeah.
Okay.
And definitely the last one, the everything everywhere all at once. There's
Ooh.
still a little bit of darkness in that the Doctor Strange stuff, but a lot of the stuff is channeled from the light to be shown to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like Star Trek, I really think there was so much disclosure in that. And I think that was given to us by the light.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So much in there. The med bed basically was in there. The replicator was in there. And they've had that in other, shows, but that was like cutting edge and such a long time ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. In terms of those technologies, what are your thoughts in terms of how soon we're going to be seeing those? Because people have been talking about med beds for years, and everyone is just like crossing their fingers any day now. But,
I know.
We're not sure when that's coming. Do you have any lead in on that for us?
Really, humanity hasn't been ready for it yet, but I think that now we are as a collective. So I think what we're going to see is some big changes over the next like month and a half to maybe a little bit longer, depending on where you're at and what parallel you're in. But we're going to see an unfolding that goes on probably until spring. And after that, we could see a lot of change. Like I see a flurry of change at that point. I don't ever get that replicators are going to be available to like every household, like a microwave right away. So that'll be something that comes slower. But I think the med beds have been here for a long time.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, and that only certain people, shall we say, at the top of the pyramid have access to these technologies and have had access for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. But they only had access to fourth density. So the things that we're going to be experiencing, humanity is going to be experiencing are beyond what they had access to, because they couldn't get beyond fourth density. And they couldn't see beyond fourth density, because fourth density is like the chaos area in between third and fifth.
Is that where we reside at this moment? We're in fourth density?
We're at the top of the fourth density, most people. So depending on how much chaos you're experiencing, you're further into fourth density, but you're floating on the top of it, a lot of us. And some of us have stepped into fifth density, but we don't know it. We're not recognizing it yet. So we're not really truly experiencing it. Yeah.
And I know another big change that has been talked about for a long time is the overhaul of our financial system, and that Bitcoin is very popular these days, whether we're going to move into a fully cryptocurrency type system. But also the other thing that has always come up is Nesara Gesara. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because again, when it comes to that topic, a lot of people felt like they were going to have all of their loans wiped clean. They would no longer have a home loan or credit card debt or any school debt. And people were kind of crossing their fingers waiting for that day too. Is that something we can look forward to, or have we been lied to about what's coming down the pipeline as it relates to that? Oh, it is.
Coming. Yeah. And if you listen to some of the speeches of Mr. T, let's call him, you definitely clue into that. And I see it in clips that come out. Like TikTok's one of my favorite things to get information from. So there are clips, he's talking about it all the time. And that's been a big baby of his. So he's definitely working for that. But really what we're looking at is the military like taking over the systems and letting the systems crash. But there's already something in the background.
The other thing that also we are expecting to have change is just taking back our sovereignty. So when we are first born, we're given a social security number, which is basically the way that they sell us. Like, we're actually sold on a black market for what the potential earnings are that we have in a lifetime, and that money is assigned to us. And there's somewhere you can find this out, and I don't know, I've looked for it and I can't find it, but essentially we are sold. And that, again, it's illegal to actually ask us to have a number assigned to us. And there's something also having to do with how our name is capitalized. So when you write a loan, like let's say a home loan, your name is written in capitals because you're actually being sold as an individual, or I'm sorry, and I might be getting this confused, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there's one entity that we have as a capital of our name, and that is either us individually or as a corporation. But then there's also the other entity of us personally, where our name is not capitalized. Do you have any knowledge on what I'm referring to here? Can you shed some light on that for us?
Yeah. I talk a lot about this on Telegram. So I have a channel there. Now, what it is basically when you're born and you get a social security number, they put it all in capitals. So that's when you become incorporated.
Okay.
So they're basically using your incorporation and the money that they put into your incorporation or your corporation to trade. They're pulling from that money when you get a home loan. They're pulling from that money when you get a car loan. Like, none of that money should have interest attached to it because it's your money, but they do it anyway. So the bankers at the top, they knew how this worked. And I don't think the loan officer probably even knows. So all interest will go away. Interest is illegal. The main thing you want to remember is that we've been in what's called maritime law. So the law of the sea, which has been controlled by much more negative, entities. And we're going to go into common law, which is the law of man, which is going to be like, if you've done harm to someone, then there's a consequence. If you've hurt someone in some way, then there's a consequence. But otherwise, like all these ridiculous things that they've come up with, including speeding and, traveling without your tags or all that stuff isn't legal in common law. So we will switch over to that because maritime law is a big part of how control happened.
And I think the maritime law and our financial system both came from draconian law, if I recall correctly, which is why we have the systems we have. Like, we basically learned from them. They put these things in place and nobody thought to change them.
Well, because they kept resetting society. So nobody remembered long enough to know this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. So that's where the stuff about Tartaria and the mud flood and, all that kind of stuff, the incubator babies and things that we can't really talk about on YouTube too much, really came from. So all of those resets really changed everything for humanity because we couldn't remember that maybe it wasn't always that way. And also the shortening of the lifespan of a human being, which
because in biblical times, they were hundreds of years old.
Yep. So we're going to live a lot longer. And that's another perk of the crystalline body. Yeah.
And hopefully we won't have to eat because that's a nuisance for me.
I do feel like that will eventually go a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about sleeping?
I have gotten that we're going to sleep about 4 hours a day.
I would love that.
Yeah. The day is going to expand quite a bit. So we're not really seeing the actual, sky. We do at night at this point because a lot of like the ice has come down, which, that's a whole nother rabbit hole for people. It's been disclosed over and over again that we're living in a dome. And at this point, That's not an ice dome anymore. It's just a frequency dome. So during the day, we're seeing like a hologram of the sky, but at night, it's different.
Like Truman Show.
Yeah.
What is the reason that it would be up during the day and not at night?
For our own like mental help or mental health. Like,
but what would we see otherwise?
We would see more of a periwinkle sky that's light, like it's all the light is softer. So if you were to go outside, you're going to see a tremendous amount of green. You're going to have more oxygen. And you're going to see like this periwinkle, which is like purple and blue mixed light coming in from the firmament because there's no dome. So there's basically a dome like that's created by the plasma that is space. So I don't get that space is empty either. I get that it's made of plasma. So the dome was made of what they call sky ice. And there is information on the internet about this, but it's basically similar to dry ice, but extremely blue. So think about glacier blue. So that was the color that we were seeing, but now we have a hologram in place of that instead. So sometimes people are seeing more of a purplish sky, especially in the south, and that's more normal. That's the more normal sky.
But don't they, I believe that they can change the weather patterns now, right? They can actually create storms. And there's even talk that that recent storm that they had out east was actually done on purpose. It was developed on purpose, the one that came across Florida. How would that affect this dome frequency, whatever we want to call that? How would the manipulated weather patterns affect that?
Well, that's where we get the northern lights from. So that has a lot to do with that. But we're also, the manipulation has to do with the lower timelines. So that was a pretty big storm, but it was, all the timelines are sandwiched right now together because we're getting ready for something big to happen. So think of Earth, and you have all these different game boards of Earth, and they're all in a sandwich together, and people are experiencing different things. So just like my husband loves spaghetti, but I can take it or leave it, that's a different perspective. And some people are still in much more fear, and some people are in the middle of that, and then some people are excited. So we've been experiencing all the timelines at once right now, and one of those was a pretty severe weather event, but it's, it got like dispersed because a whole lot of people came together to help that be dispersed. So we can override the weather manipulation, but it is still active in lower timelines.
Could you just, for those who, like myself, who just learned about it, could you just explain what the ice wall is in Antarctica and what's going on with that? Before we get into Antarctica, because I know we're going to go down there, there has been so many sightings lately. And I'm like, you had mentioned that there's something big coming. And when you say something big, and this could be very generic, but is it something big in terms of disclosure and seeing more ships, or is it the opening up the portals, or is it the higher consciousness? So what when you say this big thing is coming, because I've heard a couple of psychics say that the end of October something is happening. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, in the timeline that we're probably in, pretty close together, we're going to be seeing the systems fall. So basically people being exposed completely, people being asked to stay home for a few days, and all this disclosure coming out in more of a forced way. So that's what I think the event is. And I think shortly after that, we will probably have ETContact.
When you say
go into martial law, you think?
Yeah. Why would they to stay home, when you say that they have to stay home, why would that be?
So it would be, listen, all of this has happened. The military wants you to stay home. The military's taken over because the government has gone rogue, and it'll be system after system that gets exposed. So the systems that I see are the government system, the pharmaceutical system or the medical system, education system, and there's
financial.
one more, church system.
Oh yeah. That's a big
Yeah,
one.
So the financial system will flip with the government, because
Okay.
that's a big part of that. But like, I don't even think that the I and the R and the S even exist anymore.
Wow. And I've heard that there's a whole new financial system that's already in place, and it's been put in place for many years, like like getting ready for this moment of transition into a gold-backed system versus the system that we're currently in.
And BRICS is
supposed
the
to be
public
gold.
way that you can see that.
Yeah.
Mike, okay, so and just because this is very interesting to me, and I think to most that this is the way we can bridge this gap and get more people like me. When you say that the government will be exposed and that they'll go rogue, can you give me a little bit more on that one?
Yeah, so the government's been rogue for a long time, and basically the competitions or the things that happened in November, those have never been up to the people.
Yeah.
So we're going to be at a point where it is up to the people. It will become very transparent the way that it's done, and the government will be massively reduced in size. Okay. Because basically they've just been like a monkey on the people's back, and it's been created to suck all the life out of people. So that's what's going to change, and it will be all the systems that were created by the same group that will all crash.
Yeah, that's good. That's good news. I mean,
yeah, I'm excited.
Tara's excited about everything. She just loves the new world. She loves.
I know. I'm ready.
Can't wait for.
I'm
she
ready.
wishes it was here yesterday.
So this is the picture that I drew. So imagine that you're standing on top of this, and it's like a clear dome. So we would be in the middle of this. Antarctica would be this area that's like white, and then it has a green little, it's like this little blob here. This would be the entrance to get beyond the dome. This is where more of the nefarious people were living, and they would come in and out through Antarctica. And this was their farm. So we were in their farm area. So they were farming energy. This got taken care of. This outer rim got taken care of a long time ago by the ETs. And they took care of the nefarious ones out there. And then they started working on this, on the interior, which is where we are, along with what we call the white hats. So beyond this second line is the rest of Earth. And to me, the Earth was a toroidal field. So here's the dome. The firmament would be beyond this blue line. Nobody lives on the side of Earth. And we basically only had access to about a quarter of the top of Earth. So ETs live, beyond. Tartarians were living beyond. All kinds of beings, honestly. Just a separate timeline, because they were not in the third density, no. But density is about consciousness as well as physicality. So they had graduated out of that density already. They were in fourth density, which is where that outer rim was also at. So they were in fourth density too. They were not unaware of what was beyond the veil. So they knew what was beyond the veil, but we didn't. And part of that is the reptilian brainstem that we have. Yeah.
So what I'm getting from you is that the wall that is in Antarctica, beyond that wall is something that we cannot see it because it's on a different timeline.
No, we will be able to see it actually, because we have transversed into the top of fourth density or beyond. And a lot of people are very aware of it now. So because we've become aware of it, we will be able to go beyond the ice wall and into this area, which is absolutely beautiful because they kept it very nice for themselves.
That's beautiful.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
So the beings that were kind of controlling Earth were several different groups. So you had archons, which were kind of like they were partially tech-based, so almost like a robotic consciousness. The tall grays, reptilians, Draco, and a lot of the more lower consciousness ETs. And the Tartarians that were more negative, which were basically how do you call that? A descendant of the Anunnaki. Okay. So there's a lot to transversely think about there.
So
So the buildings are there. And I can show you guys some of what you would see. So Earth actually looks like that. So this is like the ice wall, right? And you can see that. But the buildings that you would see would be more like this.
Really?
So a lot of
like
the Tartarian buildings were destroyed. Yeah, when they decided to do another reset. But a lot of them were cathedral type buildings. So these were healing buildings, and now they're churches. But they were actually to create frequency. And you can see these in different cultures. Like in Russia, they're built a little bit differently, but they all have spires. And they all were collecting electricity from the ether. And they were using the structures of sound and translating them into other structures like star forts. And this was all to create the right energy for themselves. The original meaning of the star fort has been lost in the modern world. Now, that doesn't mean that things aren't still being used behind our back. I think the things from the electric company, so all those, look at the power lines and look at the attachments and look at the power stations. They're still pulling power from the ether, and then they're selling it to us instead of giving it to us for free.
Right. Well, I know when Tesla first came up with his inventions, he took it to, I believe, JP Morgan, who looked at it and said, if you created free energy, then we can't make money off of that. So that's when he basically ruined him and basically threw away all of his patents that he had created to give us free energy. And that was what, back in the 1920s or maybe earlier? Sometime around there. And he was trying to get money from the people that were basically nefarious. You know, they were creating a farm to harvest energy from the human beings, and Tesla had the opposite idea. They were always going to squash him. Well, they say he was from Venus. He was actually a Venusian. I think he may have had a Venusian soul. But I think he was channeling in the knowledge from Tartaria. Oh. Yeah. Now, I do think that we will be able to live beyond the ice wall. I mean, it could be as soon as 5 years from now. It could be sooner for some, because it's very empty out there right now. There's a lot of buildings. Some of the buildings have been taken down because they were more negative. So there were like black cubes out there, and, you know, certain buildings that were actually created
in a more negative way. But they also have things so like one of the technologies that keeps coming in is liquid glass. So they can build with glass and it's moldable, and they can create buildings just with glass. So I'm excited to see that. And if you think about like the way the pyramids were made, and this is maybe news to some people, but they were built with frequency. So with certain frequencies, you can basically levitate things. And I think that's how a lot of stuff was built in the past.
And I think back in Lemurian times, they talk about how the buildings were crystal, which one could say that's glass, right? I mean, we're using different words for probably the same description of what the building was made of, and that we're going back to that because the light and the colors and the sound all work together, and that these were actually healing centers. So all of that combined, people could go into it and be healed from whatever their issues were, because that would interact with the DNA of the body and repair it back to its original state.
Yeah, exactly. Like your soul knows all this stuff, but we've had so many, like, think about yourself as in the center of the onion. And we've had all these blankets of protocol or programming put over the top of us. So every time you peel another layer of the onion, you're able to see and know more.
Well, switching gears just briefly here before we wrap up, I would love to find out your thoughts on what the ET races are that we are going to experience first. Everyone I've heard from has always said it will be a humanoid, so it doesn't freak us out too much. Because I think if we saw a giant insectoid, people would be running for the hills. So do you have any idea of what we can expect? And also when would be great? Like if you have an exact date, we'll take it.
Yeah, well, so it'll be up to us when it happens, but I feel like it's very soon because the disclosure about the ETs is coming out like every day.
Yeah.
So there's more stuff every day. I think that we will probably see the Pleiadians first, but we may see the Pleiadians along with maybe like an Arcturian or a what's the heart-based one? They're beautiful purple, but they're both very humanoid. So we will see more humanoid versions of them first, but the insectoids have been amazingly helpful to us. They're very scientific. So they've really helped with the human body and healing, but I don't think people are ready to see them yet. So you're totally right about that.
Yeah.
But I do think it'll probably be a Pleiadian because they look like, if you go back to the Lord of the Rings, like they look like one of those etheric, beautiful elves beings, you know. I don't know about their ears. I don't get that they're pointed, but they're just beautiful and tall and, you know, somebody that humanity would be like, ooh, I want to look like that, you know? So I think it will make us pay attention and not be freaked out. So one of the visions that I was given is similar to the Simpson movie. And it was really exciting because when I saw that movie existed and it had a dome in it and, you know, but basically I saw a huge screen come up on the hologram. And there was Mr. T. There was some of the people that have supposedly died. And there were 2 ETs. And one of them was more of a bluish purple, so like an Andromedan. And the other one was Pleiadian. So we don't know exactly what we're going to see, but that is a possibility. Like they are capable of creating that.
Well, I am definitely here for it. I would be so excited, and I'm looking forward to that day because I'm kind of over humanity. I'm ready for some new stuff. I'm ready to meet some new people, and if that has to be a Palladian or an Arcturian, great. That would be amazing. So they are certainly welcome welcome here, buy my book.
Awesome.
But honey, you are awesome. We covered so much and we still have so much more we'd love to talk to you about. And out of respect for your time, we're going to wrap up today, but we'd love to have you back again. And maybe we can even set up a live next time. I think that would be really fun if you're open to that. And I know you also offer online live classes. You have recorded classes all on your website. You also offer different types of healing. So you do it all. You are just full of information, and we're going to go ahead and put all those links in the description of the video. And just before we wrap up today, do you have any special projects or any final messages you'd like to share with anyone listening?
Love the human part of yourself right now. That's the biggest thing to do, and do the things that make you happy. So that is the way that you keep moving up that staircase, is to be happy in yourself and to let go of the things that make you unhappy. So, and also being willing to receive is really important, because humanity hasn't been willing to allow the abundance to come in for a long time. And we're at the point now where the abundance is ready to come in, and just making sure that you allow for it. So dig into yourself and see what's going on in your own psyche and subconscious, and love your, what I call the inner child, which is the human part of you. So love that up right now is what I would say.
That's so great. I love that. And we love abundance too. So we want that as well. And so thank you so much again for your time and generously offering all of the knowledge that you shared today. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.